Hey everyone, thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Weathering the Market. I'm meteorologist Kailey Carey.
And I'm meteorologist Dion.
And today we're going to talk about something pretty interesting. If you've been checking into the weather or just checking out what's happening in the Midwest, it's not only happening in the Midwest, but it's especially happening down here in Texas. And that's what kind of spurred me to look deeper into it. So what's been happening here in Texas?
Well, actually, what we've been seeing, what's been going on is, we've been seeing a pretty decent amount of rainfall across portions of the eastern half of Texas, especially, of course, like southeast Texas, southern Louisiana, and even parts of the northern plains that have actually been in desperate need for rainfall. They've been getting some pretty adequate rainfall, which, if you've been kind of keeping up with things and looking into these, the El Nino and everything like that, it's the above average precipitation, at least especially for down in these parts, hasn't really been part of the forecast, but it's showing up. So, needless to say, things have evolved over the last couple of months, and so now we're here.
Here we are. Well, I think it's also something to say we've made it past that spring forecast barrier. I feel like about 10 days ago or so, models started picking up on this excess rain that we are anticipated to have in Texas, and it answered. I mean, average for this time of year is roughly a little over 3.5 inches where we live, and we've had over 6. And Houston, the same. They've actually had over 11 inches of rain, and they've had 19 days of rain out of the last 25. So May has been, it's been
really wet. I've actually looked this up yesterday. There were parts of East Texas that have received up to 20 inches of rain already.
Yes.
In 19 days.
Okay. So then I did some digging.
Yeah.
You want to know what I found?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So the Sonoran Heat Ridge, which typically, that starts in the Sonoran state of Mexico, goes over the desert and up further north. Well, currently there's basically what they call a transweakness, or a gap in between the Sonoran Heat Ridge and the Bermuda High. So when this gap happens, basically what's happening is all of that Gulf moisture is just being funneled up right in between. So it's kind of acting as a highway for upper level or upper air moisture to kind of make its way in. So hence all the disturbances across Texas. But the moisture doesn't just stop in Texas. It continues up further north into the Midwest, which is kind of a gift for them, don't you think?
Absolutely. With rain totals been greatly lacking in those parts. That any and every bit of precipitation that they can get in those parts of the country are very beneficial.
Mm-hmm. So the more upper air moisture that we can see up across the Midwest, up into the Dakotas, basically what that's allowing for is for thunderstorm development. So as any system starts to make its way through, and we are looking at a pretty active system over the next couple of weeks or so as a series of fronts make their way through, and that's something else we're going to touch on.
Yeah.
Are the below average temperatures that we are anticipating for the month of June. Now the long range models are actually becoming more consistent, and they continue to become more consistent over time, which is something that we, don't see, quite that often, especially this time of year. But I really think as we're starting to make our way through the spring forecast barrier, everything's starting to align. And May was kind of a back and forth month, but it's been warm out east, cool in the central portion of the country, and warm out west. And that's because we have those two, basically,
the two
ridges on the outside. So, and then what are you looking at as we head into June? What are you seeing?
So as we head into June, we should start to slowly transition. We'll continue to see these wet and cooler periods across portions of the plains and of course, the Midwest, Ohio Valley, also kind of looking to be very consistent in those parts. Towards the end of the month and then going into kind of like the bulk of summer, really, we're looking at a slow and gradual transition of moisture eastward, which we've touched on before in parts of our other, some of our other forecasts, whereas that's beginning to align more with a lot of some of the ENSO forecasts that we're looking at. So we're looking at above average precipitation across portions of the southeast U.S. and along the East Coast. But this also could be implications of potential tropical activity as well.
Exactly. So when these two ridges basically have the gap between the two, eventually for the month of June, long range models are forecasting that this gap between the two ridges is going to slowly start to shift its way further east. And a lot of times when we see that, it implies like if anything tropical develops, a lot of times that's where it's going to hit. And I found it interesting that when you look out further, like into the 16 to 30 day, or even the 11 to 15 day at this point, where are we seeing excess rainfall?
Well, we're seeing a lot of excess rainfall eastward.
Yes, across Alabama
Yeah.
and the Delta region. But what people need to understand is like that is exactly what Texas has been dealing with. And all that precipitation and moisture has been funneled up further north as well. So we're going to start to see a gradual shift east from this precipitation that we've been seeing in Texas and the Dakotas slowly start to shift just a little bit further east throughout the month of June. So all in all, June is anticipated to remain slightly cooler for the central portion and along with more precipitation. So how much more can Texas take at this point? I don't know.
I don't know. Usually summers are pretty brutal though, so I've imagined getting a nice, good surplus of rainfall. If only most of the state, especially parts of the Panhandle in West Texas where they're having issues with drought. If they could capitalize on that, but certainly I think getting a nice surplus of moisture across portions of or this portion of the country before that begins to transfer to the east would be very helpful. Or is going to be very helpful for us.
Oh, yes, definitely. And then for further insight on market implications, we're going to go ahead and head over to Larry. Thanks for tuning in today, guys.
Thank you, Kailey and Dion. As far as weather impacts on the markets, of course, the rain in Texas has really not much impact on the markets, even if it moves eastward into Alabama. But if it does move northward, as you mentioned, into the eastern corn belt, of course, the rain makes grain, as they say, so that should be beneficial. I still think we're going to have a real weather market evolving here in June with the tight stocks, and it appears based on the forecast that the main threat of dryness will be more in the western belt. If this forecast holds, that would include Iowa, maybe western Illinois, certainly Nebraska, Minnesota. So as far as other drought areas, and the Dakotas are getting a little bit of rain, still have to watch those closely, especially for the spring wheat. In North Dakota, Canadian prairies are not out of the woods yet. They've had some rain, but they still remain a threat, especially in Manitoba. There's a threat of drought. The harvest is winding down in the safrinha corn areas in Brazil. We may still see the next report, some more reductions in the production estimates there, but it's winding down, so it's not having a direct market impact. We're well into harvest there, and the rains really wouldn't help. And they're not expected to get any problems with harvest with their seasonal dryness. An area we have to watch closely because especially the corn market's depending on corn out of Ukraine and Russia this year, especially with the tight stocks. And we've had some signs of a little dryness over there extending into the spring wheat areas in the new land. So that's an area that we'll have to watch closely as the next couple of weeks evolve. And China still looks great. We're watching China closely, but there's nothing, no red flags there yet. Continue to monitor it. And that's about it for today. I expect, again, around June 10th, we'll enter a weather market where every 6 to 10 day forecast will move the market significantly. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Weathering the Market. We love sharing all this information with you guys. And if you didn't already know, we work for a company called Minuteman Weather, which provides a full range of energy and agricultural weather services. If you would like to sign up for a free trial or request more information, check us out at minutemanweather.com. We'll be back next Wednesday. Thanks.